All right, good to see you. Job chapter 26. Please take a look in there. My hope is that we will look at this whole section here. It's Job's final speech. It is not overwhelmingly difficult, even though you say, well, that's a whole chapter, but the chapter is generally one thought, and so it's pretty simple to look at. I do want to make a little point about this morning in case anybody had a misunderstanding. The person who texted me with the mean text was not being mean. We were having fun, and it was a joke. And I still won't tell you who it was, except it's Crystal's husband. But other than that, just to keep it under wraps there. But now Adam and I have a relationship that is very special, and I thoroughly enjoy it. That's what some people call it. That's right. However you define special, that's great. No, we have a lot of fun. But I do want to mention that one of the questions also was, can you just explain glory a little bit more? And I know that's everybody seems to have that particular question. When you look at Romans 8, you will see it mentioned many times without the word glory. He made us his sons, his children. He made us heirs of his kingdom. He exalts us to glory just like Jesus. He does all these things, and then there's just a ton of things throughout the Bible that lifts us to this higher level. Think about what we studied in Ecclesiastes this morning. What is the overwhelming desire that you see in the first two chapters? Solomon's going, when you get to chapter 2, Solomon's going to go, I did this, 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 and I built more than anything. And I cut it all, and he goes, and it was absolutely worthless. When I got all done, it was vanity. It just appeared. It was fun while I did it, and it's gone. God's lifting us above that. He's bringing us to greatest glory. I love this. Here is glory. 2 Thessalonians. Glory summarized. 2 Thessalonians, verse 9. Speaking of the enemy, they will suffer the punishment of eternal destruction away from the presence of the Lord and from the glory of his might, when he comes on that day to be glorified in his saints and to be marveled at among all who believed, because our testimony to you was believed. Imagine the Lord on that great day. He gathers us all. And he says, just look at what I did. I brought them all to glory with me, glorified in his saints. Doesn't just say by, in his saints. And he says, look at this. And I'm amazed. And we're all amazed, because we look at our life before, and we look at what we were before Jesus got a hold of us. And we say, how in the world did he take that junk and bring it to glory? And he says, that's my power. That's my greatness. And I am bringing you to greatness. And we are raised and exalted to sit with him on his throne. And all the angels are going, wow. We're above them. We've been exalted above them. He's made a kingdom of us. He's made us a new Jerusalem. He's set us on a mountaintop. Everything you read in Revelation that he's going to do, that's glory, 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 over and over again. Jesus says it in simple words, and sometimes it's just hard for us to go, you probably weren't talking about me. Yeah, I'm talking about you, God says. That's what I'm doing. I'm talking about you. There's one way to get there. You got to trust me. You got to follow me. You got to give up your life to me. And sometimes it's going to feel like I ruin your life, but I'm doing it for a reason, because I'm bringing you to glory. Woohoo. That's right. So when we read Job here, this is what Job does not understand. This is where Job is just totally confused. And can you blame him? He has no background like we do. He doesn't have the book of Job to read like we do to say, that's what this is about. That rotten Satan is doing these things. God is using it as a test. God is trying to get me to trust him more. He didn't have any of those things. So we have a little compassion for the man, because tonight we're going to read about the greatness of Job as well. So in chapter 26, so we'll go to there in chapter 26. These things I'm going to hit pretty rapidly, and I'll give you a little heads up. After chapter 31, Job is done talking, except to say to God later on, I'm sorry, please don't hit me. Kidding. That's not exactly what but he is really repentant. But what we're going to see beginning in chapter 32 is this other young man named Elihu that has been sitting by watching all this and listening to all this and getting more and more angry at the dumb things that people are saying. And Elihu is where we're going to slow down, because I got to tell you, the words of Elihu will give you wonderful, wonderful hope. The young man has got it together, and it is a beautiful, beautiful speech that he gives. Okay, here we go. Job is now replying, chapter 26, to Bildad's final speech. And that's the final speech of any of the friends. They've pretty well given up. And so first in chapter 26, Job is going to answer Bildad. And then from 27 to 31, he's going to give his closing speech. So there's a general outline. Then we'll look a little more specific as we go. All right, so go on to chapter 26, and we'll just notice here the final answer that Job gives to Bildad and the other friends. Then Job answered and said, "How you have helped him who has no power. How you have saved the arm that has no strength." You can just see Job just all withered up and beat up and everything else. And he goes, "Well, thankfully, I finally got somebody that just really knows how to help me. Same old thing you guys have been saying for months." And you can just see the irony and the sarcasm in his words. So he says, "How you have counseled him who has no wisdom and plentifully declared sound knowledge." You'll notice, of course, back in chapter 25, there's 6 verses, and they don't say anything that Bildad could help him with. Verse 4, he says, "With whose help have you uttered words, and whose breath has come out from you?" So, by the way, Bildad, who helped you say those brilliant words? Well, it certainly wasn't God, and whatever you said didn't mean a thing. So, you can just see Job just fed up with what they have been doing. Now he gives verse 5 and following here, his final jab he gives, and then verse 5 and following, he's going to outline a very important principle. He says, "The dead tremble under the waters and their inhabitants. Sheol is naked before God, and Abaddon has no covering. He stretches out the north over the void and hangs the earth on nothing. He binds up the waters in his thick clouds, and the cloud is not split open under them. He covers the face of the full moon and spreads over it its cloud." You can see a idea here of an eclipse that takes place. "He inscribed a circle on the face of the waters at the boundary between light and darkness," the horizon he mentions there. "The pillars of heaven tremble and are astounded at his rebuke. By his power he stilled the sea. By his understanding he shattered Rahab," the mythical, or if not mythical, but ancient dragon of Egypt. By his wind the heavens were made fair. His hand pierced the fleeing serpent." Now what Job does in these 13 verses, he just says, look, there's all these things, we can see it. Some of it we can't see it. The dead we can't see. They're covered up. There's all these things that we can't see, and there's some things that we can see that he mentions that goes on in nature. And then watch verse 14. "Behold, these are but the outskirts of his ways." Okay, what I just mentioned, Job says, this is just the simple stuff. This is just the outskirts of his ways. And how small a whisper do we hear of him? But the thunder of his power, who can understand? In other words, you go beyond that, you go deeper in that, and who can understand it? He says, I don't understand it. We can't even do this. So what's Job been wanting all these months is somebody get beyond the just surface what I can see and tell me about what is going on and help me understand how God wields this power, how he does this. And so his point is, you guys are so simplistic in your answers that you're not helping anything. So here is way the New American Standard states this part in verse 2 and 3. What a help you are to the weak. You have saved the arm without strength. What advice you have given to one without wisdom. What helpful insight have you abundantly provided. Who has helped you utter such wonderful words? And then Job's description of power and the complexity of God. God's sovereignty is over all his creation. And you see these little illustrations. The dead tremble. They're hidden under the waters, thus invisible to man, but naked before God. Then the complexity of God's creation, all that goes on. And then finally, God's ability to intervene on his own in laws of nature and do as he pleases. Okay, you say, why all that? Because he's trying to tell the friends, quit acting like you know everything God is doing. You don't know. We can just see a little bit of this, and that's really all we can see. These are just an example. These examples are just a whisper of his ways, just the outskirt of his ways. Who can know more than that? Who can understand more than that? So it's a really good point, really good speech. And this is where, of course, Job struggles. They tried to make it very simplistic. You sin, you get punished. You don't sin, you live high on the hog. That was their constant answer, and he's trying to show that doesn't so. So how has Job taught his friends in this exposition in verse 26? What would you say? Stop here and do a little class type thing. What does he say? How has God taught his friends just by mentioning those things? You follow that? Probably surprised you there by that question. The idea being, look, you just look at the surface of what God has done and we see that, but how do we know more? How can we get beyond that? The friends just will not admit that there are things here that are beyond our understanding of what God has done. So they've proclaimed that God governs the universe by these hard set rules, and yet when you look at nature, do you see hard set rules? You see things just going everywhere, and you can't absolutely understand them. Job shows that we can't even figure out God's ways and what we observe, much less what God is hidden. Don't know what's beyond that. And then what should we learn from this? So that's the simple part. Job hasn't hit it yet. What should we learn from this? Trust God. Quit acting like you can give all the answers. I don't know. I'm going to trust God, and that's going to be the way I'm going to look at this. God governs beyond our understanding. We cannot figure that out. Job seems to be growing and learning here. There's a wisdom of God that's deeper than anything man can discern. That's a great step by Job, because he keeps wondering, why? And now he says, okay, look, there's a wisdom here we just can't reach. We can't really understand. And that's what you friends need to get here. Paul says it this way in Romans 11:33. Oh, the depth of the riches and the wisdom and knowledge of God, how unsearchable are his judgments, how unfathomable his ways. For who has known the mind of the Lord, who has been his counselor, or who has given a gift to him that he might be repaid? For from him and through him and to him are all things. To him be glory forever. Amen. Trust The way God is doing things, you're not going to understand things all the time, but it is going to be good in the end because God is going to do the right thing. That's the idea. Any questions about chapter 26? Pretty straightforward.
It's almost as simple as it's almost as a switch because he's always answered the questions have always been the same from the friends.
Yeah.
And he's always defended himself by explaining that's not what you're saying is not always true.
Right.
And then all of a sudden he comes and it's like it's brilliant.
Yeah, it really is. And I really do think you can see some growth in Job through this. He seems to have gotten past the point of why, and why don't you come and talk to me, and why don't you tell me, why don't you, I'm just beside myself, why don't I die? He seems to have gotten past that, and now is really trying to figure out what the challenge is and why it's such a challenge and what he can learn about God. And that's what we're going to see a little bit more here. So let's stop for a second. Why is this important for us? You will, I mentioned this morning, you will go through trials. And some of them are going to be so hard and so difficult that you're not going to be able to see the light at the end of the tunnel. You're just going to be in despair. You'll wonder if it's ever going to end. You'll wonder if it's ever going to stop. Your pain will be beyond description. Those are what happened to everybody in life, and God uses them on purpose. So what's important? In book of Proverbs, chapter 1, Solomon will actually tell us, if you don't get wisdom now, you're going to be destroyed when the hard time comes. It's going to take you apart at the seams. So it's important to buy your life insurance before you die. That's a pretty good point, right? It's brilliant. It took me hours to think of that. No. Buy trial insurance before the trial. And these words are very important for us to learn. Okay? So that's the idea. Go to chapter 27. I want you to notice first the summary that takes place here in these first 6 verses. Job again took up his discourse and said, "As God lives, who has taken away my right, and the Almighty, who has made my soul bitter, as long as my breath is in me and the Spirit of God is in my nostrils, my lips shall not speak falsehood, my tongue will not utter deceit. Far be it from me to say that you are right." The word "you" there is plural. Now he's talking to all the friends. "Till I die, I will not put away my integrity from me. I hold fast my righteousness. I will not let it go. My heart does not reproach me for any of my days." So what is Job doing? What is he saying he'll never ever deny, or never ever say that he was wrong about? Yeah, that he's guilty of their accusation that he's done some kind of great sin. He says, I will never change on that. I will never, if I changed and said, I'd be lying. And I'm not going to lie. I'm telling you the truth. This is the way it is. I have not done that. And he said, I may not understand basically what how God has made my soul bitter, but I will not lie about my spiritual condition. I know I'm right before God. Pretty bold. But he's right. He's absolutely right. I know I'm right before God. And he's not, that doesn't mean he thinks he never sinned, or he thinks he's not, doesn't make mistakes. That's not the idea. But he's saying, I didn't do all these bad things that you guys say I did in order to deserve this. That just isn't what it was. Okay, next section here. So watch what he says. This is where you want to find out, what did he say about the enemies? "Let my enemy be as the wicked, and let him who rises up against me be as the unrighteous. For what is the hope of the godless when God cuts him off, when God takes away his life? Will God hear his cry when distress comes upon him? Will he take delight in the Almighty? Will he call upon God at all times? I will teach you concerning the hand of God, what is with the Almighty I will not conceal. Behold, all of you have seen it yourselves. Why then have you become altogether vain? All right. So who is he referring to when he talks about the enemy? Who's the enemy here that he refers to? The friends, yeah. Yeah, the enemy is the friends. They become the enemy. What he's basically saying here is, you guys are the ones in danger of God. You've been telling me I'm the one in danger of being punished by God. You're the one that's in danger of punishment by God because you are standing up against a righteous man who has done righteously. You have not given the right answer. I have done righteously. I have not been in sin, and I do not deserve this. And so you are the guys that are in danger. He's exactly right about that. They are in big danger. In fact, God tells them they need to repent and ask Job to pray for them at the end of the book. So very, very strong words. Now watch what the next warning. He basically says, verse 12, you've seen this for yourself. Verse 13, this is the portion of a wicked man with God and the heritage that oppressors receive from the Almighty. If his children are multiplied, it is for the sword, and his descendants have not enough bread. Those who survive him, the pestilence buries, and his widows do not weep. Though he heap up silver like dust and pile up clothing like clay, he may pile it up, but the righteous will wear it, and the innocent will divide the silver. He builds his house like a moth's, like a booth that a watchman makes. He goes to bed rich, but will do so no more. He opens his eyes, his wealth is gone. Terrors overtake him like a flood. In the night a whirlwind carries him off. The east wind lifts him up, and he is gone. He sweeps him out of his place. It hurls at him without pity. He flees from its power in headlong flight. It claps its hands at him and hisses at him from its place. What happens to the wicked? Everything bad. What's that sound like? What we've read before in Job.
Sounds like what happened to him.
Pardon?
Sounds like what happened to him.
Yeah, it sounds like what the friends have been saying about what's evil, but this is a different context. What Job is saying is that's not an automatic rule. He's just saying eventually the wicked will get punishment. Doesn't mean you can't look around and see wicked people that are wealthy. He's already mentioned that. So he's using it in a different context than what the friends would use it. And he's not suggesting that just every time you see somebody that's wicked and wealthy, that it's just automatically going to happen this way. But he says, yeah, general rule, God is going to eventually punish those who have been treated others this way. So he says, you know this well. This is the end result of the wicked. That's what's going to take place. All right, let's go on to chapter 28. All right, chapter 28. Surely there is a mine for silver. Now, here's where you got to go with him for a second here through verse 11 and figure out what he's saying. He's talking about earthly things. Surely there's a mine for silver and a place for gold that they refine. Iron is taken out of the earth, and copper is smelted from the ore. Man makes an end to darkness and searches out the farthest limit, the ore in gloom and deep darkness. So what's he doing? What's man doing in this situation? Yeah, he's digging in the ground. He's finding valuables and ore and jewels and diamonds and gold and whatever else that he might find in there that is of value. So he opens the darkness into light is the idea. He opens the shafts in a valley away from where anyone lives. They're forgotten by travelers. They hang in the air far away from mankind. They swing to and fro. As for the earth, out of it comes bread, but underneath it's turned up as by fire. So in other words, bringing out the good stuff takes all this extra work. Its stones are in the place of sapphires, and it has dust of gold. The path no bird of prey knows. The birds don't know about that underground. The falcon's eye can't see it, has not seen it. The proud beast have not trodden it. The lion has not passed over it. Man puts his hand to the flinty rock and overturns mountains by the roots. roots. That's been going on a long time, hasn't it? So, you see, they had bulldozers back then, too. You just didn't think, we just forgot it. Ecclesiastes, we didn't know. He cuts out channels in the rocks, and his eye sees very precious thing. He dams up the streams so that they do not trickle, and the thing that is hidden he brings out to light. Okay, how much work goes into that? You see, he's talking about all the stuff that goes in. Now, contrast. Verse 12. But where shall wisdom be found? And where is the place of understanding? Man does not know its worth, and it is not found in the land of the living. The deep says, it's not in me. The sea says, it's not with me. It cannot be bought for gold, and silver cannot be weighed as its price. It cannot be valued in the gold of Ophir, in precious onyx or sapphire. Gold and glass cannot equal it, nor can it be exchanged for jewels or fine gold. No mention shall be made of coral or of crystal. The price of wisdom is above pearls. The topaz of Ethiopia cannot equal it, nor can it be valued in pure gold. So he says, but when you contrast all this wealth and stuff that you get out of the ground, wisdom is so much greater. What's it take to get it? Can't buy it. Can't dig in the ground for it. Can't find it. It's not just laying out there to go get it. So Job's saying, look guys, this is a lot harder than you think it is. And we need to understand the challenge here of this wisdom, and trying to find out where that's found is the challenge that he's suggesting here. So you contrast it with the finding of precious stones, and then the finding of wisdom is far more difficult. So here's where Job's growth, I think, is. Again, seeking wisdom. That doesn't seem to be where Job was before. He's trying to, let me slow down here. Instead of accusing God, instead of throwing things at God and asking all these questions, maybe I should stop and think back. How do I find wisdom? At the same time, he's talking about how difficult it is. Think it's difficult to find wisdom? Certainly. Very, very difficult. It takes experience. It takes a lifetime. It takes listening, it takes caring, it takes searching for God and seeing His wisdom. There's a lot to that. And as the Proverbs will say, wisdom is everything. Wisdom will give you the life that you've always desired, because whether good or bad, wisdom is very important. All right, now notice verse 20. From where then does wisdom come? And where is the place of understanding? It is hidden from the eyes of all living and concealed from the birds of the air. Abaddon and death say, we have heard of a rumor of it with our ears. So Abaddon and death, in other words, life after death, the world of the dead. And you ask Abaddon, and which means destruction, and all that. You go, have you guys heard of wisdom? Yeah, I heard about it. Can't find it though. I don't know where it is. So he's just talking, just searching the depth of everywhere, and still can't find it. Verse 23, God understands the way to it, and He knows its place. Ooh, brilliant. God's the one who has it. For He looks to the ends of the earth and sees everything under the heavens. When He gave to the wind its weight and apportioned the waters by measure, when He made a decree for the rain and the way for the lightning and the thunder, then He saw it and declared it. He established it and searched it out. So he recognizes God's wisdom in all that He created and God's nature. And then he comes to this great conclusion, verse 28. And He said to man, behold, the fear of the Lord, that is wisdom, and to turn away from evil is understanding. Why is that? Why is that answer such an answer for Job's search that he doesn't seem to quite get, but he's on the right track? How is that the answer for wisdom for us? Behold, the fear of the Lord is wisdom.
He's presented a gigantic case that says this person you can have faith in, but you really need to understand who he is.
That's right. Here is who you can trust and have faith in. You may not always understand it, but He's the one with wisdom. He's got it all. He sees it all. And that's where we have to turn. Brilliant. That's exactly right. Again, I think you see some growth in Job up to this point. Things began to change as he's contemplating his condition and the situation and contemplating God. All right. So we go to chapter 29. Now, the last point I make here, Job still seeks and desires God. So that's what you see this. So this is the beauty of what Job's doing. Here's the big positive of Job. You don't understand. It's totally difficult for him, but he still sees the beauty of God and the importance of God, and he still desires God. He wants God with all of his heart, and that's going to be shown in the rest of this. Now, in his final three chapters here, which we obviously aren't going to get to tonight, but here in 29 through 31, here's where Job sums up his case before God. Let me give you a quick outline. Chapter 29, longing for the former days. Chapter 30, a lament of his present suffering. And then chapter 31, the protest of his innocence before God. So there's your basic outline. I think we have time to look at 29 here and his longing for the former days. I want you to feel this one. Be Job for a second. This is heartbreaking. It's just tragic to hear him talk about what the former days were like. Job again took up his discourse and said, "Oh, that I were in the months of old, as in the days when God watched over me." See what he wants most? Oh, when God watched over me. When God cared about me and loved me. Oh, something else. When his lamp shone upon my head, and by his light I walked through darkness. As I was in my prime, when the friendship of God was upon my tent. See what he really wants? Everything is right there. When the Almighty was yet with me, when my children were all around me. Stop. Was the Almighty with him at this present point? That's going to be the end of Elihu's speech, in which he said, He's always been there. He's always been there. You just didn't know it. Oh, such a gorgeous picture. He says, when my steps, verse 6, when the Almighty was with me, when my children were all around me, when my steps were washed with butter, and the rock poured out for me streams of oil. When I went out to the gate of the city, when I prepared my seat in the square, the young men saw me and withdrew, and the aged rose and stood. The princes refrained from talking and laid their hand on their mouth. The voice of the nobles was hushed, and their tongues stuck to the roof of their mouth. When the ear heard, it called me blessed, and when the eye saw, it approved. Key word here, verse 12. Because I delivered the poor who cried for help, and the fatherless who had none to help him. The blessing of him who was about to perish came upon me, and I caused the widow's heart to sing for joy. I put on righteousness, and it clothed me. My justice was like a robe and a turban. I was eyes to the blind and feet to the lame. I was a father to the needy, and I searched out the cause of him who I did not know. I broke the fangs of the unrighteous and made him drop his prey from his teeth. Then I thought, I shall die in my nest. I shall multiply my days as the sand. My roots spread out to the waters. With the dew all night on my branches, my glory fresh with me, and my bow ever new in my hand. Men listened to me and waited and kept silence for my counsel. After I spoke, they did not speak again, and my word dropped upon them. They waited for me as for the rain, and they opened their mouths as for the spring rain. I smiled on them when they had no confidence, and the light of my face they did not cast down. I chose their way and sat as chief, and I lived like a king among his troops, like one who comforts mourners. But now they laugh at me. Men who are younger than I, whose fathers I would have disdained to set with the dogs of my flock. What could I gain with the strength of their hands, men whose vigor is gone? Through want and hard hunger they gnaw the dry ground by night in waste and desolation. They pick saltwort and the leaves of bushes and the roots of the broom tree for their food. They are driven out from human company. They shout after them as after a thief. In the gullies of the torments they must dwell, in the holes of the earth and the rocks. Among the bushes they bray, under the nettles they huddle together, a senseless, a nameless brood. They have been whipped out of the land, and now I have become their song. I'm a byword to them. They abhor me. They keep aloof from me. They do not hesitate to spit at the sight of me. Because God, another because, God has loosed my cord and humbled me. They have cast off restraint in my presence. On my right hand the rabble rise. They push away my feet. They cast up against me their ways of destruction. They break up my path. They promote my calamity. They need no one to help them. As through a wide breach they come, and amid the crash, or NIV, the ruins, they roll on. Terrors are turned upon me. My honor is pursued as by the wind, and my prosperity is passed away like a cloud. And now my soul is poured out within me. Days of affliction have taken hold of me. The night racks my bones, and the pain that gnaws me takes no rest. With great force my garment is disfigured. It binds me about like the collar of my tunic. God has cast me into the mire, and I become like dust and ashes. I cry to you for help, and you do not answer me. I stand, and you only look at me. You have turned cruel to me. With the might of your hand you persecute me. You lift me up on the wind. You take me and ride on it. You toss me about in the roar of the storm. For I know that you will bring me to death into the house appointed for all living. Yet does not one in a heap of ruins stretch out his hand in his disaster and cry for help? Did not I weep for him whose day was hard? Was not my soul grieve for the needy? It's like, I did this for others. Why doesn't it happen to me? And when I hoped for good, evil came. And when I waited for light, darkness came. My inward parts are in turmoil and never still. Days of affliction come to meet me. I go about darkened, but not by the sun. I stand up in the assembly and cry for help. I'm a brother of jackals and companion of ostriches. My skin turns black, falls from me, and my bones burn with heat. My lyre is turned to mourning, and my pipe to the voice of those who weep. And moving, just breaks your heart to see this man that God said in Job 1, there is nobody like him on the face of the earth. So if you ever think, I hope I've lived good enough that God doesn't put me through a trial. Ha, 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 ha. No, that is not the answer. So we'll save this last one for next time. It is this final appeal is heart-wrenching, and so we'll, Lord willing, I believe we'll do that next Sunday night. Okay. So very nice. Thank you for your participation on this, and we will look more at this final one and then introduce Elihu's speech, which is very encouraging. All right, so we're going to sing a song right now. Can we help you in any way? Please let us know. You can either step forward or talk with us afterwards. We would love to help you in understanding the Word better and to move closer to God, and that is our purpose here. So let's stand and sing.